What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel, bro. We have not done a Huawei phone in like 2-3 months, and I figured, you know what, we just got the Huawei P30 coming out, and I was like, you know what, I don't have enough money to buy that phone. I'm not about to drop like however much that phone costs to get it. I'm like, I might as well just go out and review the older units like I usually do. You know how I be. So now we're actually going to take a look at the Huawei P20, and this is the second Huawei phone I've ever owned. I owned the Huawei Nexus 6P. That's a Huawei phone, but I wouldn't really classify it as such. But the interesting thing though, if you guys don't know, with the Nexus 6P, Google and Huawei recently just started saying that they're going to start refunding people up to $400 for their boot looped Nexus 6Ps. So I kind of wish I kept mine. That would have been a pretty good investment. I bought mine for like $70. But with the Huawei P20, this phone actually came out in 2018, exactly a year ago, or a little bit over a year ago. It was released in March. And this is the first time I ever even seen a Huawei P20 in real life. And after feeling it and kind of like rubbing it around my hands and around my legs, I was like, you know what? This is a very solid feeling phone. It does not feel cheap at all. And I kind of had a stigmatization, whatever you want to call it, of Huawei phones, of it like not being like the best quality or of it being like subpar in some cases, but I was completely wrong. This phone feels like a very, very premium phone, and it should be because I spent a lot of money on this phone for what it is. Now on the front, I was kind of surprised because it does still have a home button, but not really. It's like a fingerprint sensor, but it's just kind of weird. But with the P30, I think they kind of changed it up a little bit. But in terms of the design, I will definitely say I'm surprised that this thing was released in 2018 because we have totally gone away from the fingerprint sensor being on the front. We've gone to them being on the back. So I find it kind of weird that they would do that. But again, it's like whatever. It's really not going to affect a lot of people. We do have a notch up front. It's much smaller. It's sort of like the LG G7's notch. Like it's not that big, but I would say it's more so like the OnePlus 6 or 6T's notch. Not that big of a deal at all. The screen is 5.8 inches. Now, surprisingly, it is IPS. And there's a lot of questionable things they did on this phone. I feel like they could have put an AMOLED screen. I feel like they could have just not put a front fingerprint sensor, maybe put on the back, but it's not a horrible screen at all. It is 1080p, and before me even looking at the resolution of the screen, I would have probably assumed it was 1440p. I mean, we're in this day and age that even if it is an IPS panel, it's still a very sharp looking IPS panel. Again, I would have loved to have seen an OLED panel, but I guess it's whatever. We do have glass on the back as well. Very, very premium feeling phone. Now, luckily, it is dust and splash resistant. As far as I know, there's no IP certification, but I'm sure if you sprinkle some water on it, it's not that big of a deal. And there's also a USB Type-C port on the bottom, no headphone jack at all. But in reality, this is a very premium feeling phone. It feels just like an iPhone XS or XS Max or whatever. Now, turning it on, we do have Android 9.0 Pie, which is pretty interesting. I was not expecting this thing to already have Pie. And I don't have too much experience with Huawei phones, so hopefully with this, I can actually go and start talking about them more. I've owned like all the iPhones, all the Samsung Galaxies, all the LGs and everything, so I figured I might as well add one more to my roster. And in terms of software, like I said, I'm not too familiar with Huawei phones, but if I had to say it, and if I had to take all the other Android phones into calculation as well, I would probably say that it might get Android Q, Android 10.0 for those of you who don't know, but I honestly don't know. I want to say that the software is pretty decent. You know, they have their own UI kind of thing. I think it's my UI or me UI, whatever you want to say it. I don't hate it. I think it's definitely kind of quirky. That's probably the best way I could summarize it. It's just kind of quirky. It feels just like LG's UI a little bit, like kind of childish in a way. And I say it every time and people are like, what do you mean? I just mean like, it seems kind of cartoony. Like the icons just don't look that good. It feels like I'm like a little child when I'm using it. I definitely don't think it's bad. I just think there's too much going on sometimes. But I do understand that there might be a different demographic they're trying to reach with these specific phones. Because as far as I know, these phones are pretty much made for people outside of the United States. Now, obviously the people within the United States have I own it. But I think their main demographic might be people like in Asia, maybe even Europe. But I mean, as far as I know, that's kind of an uneducated opinion on it. Bro, and shout out to everybody outside the United States, man. You guys show me so much love. I just checked my stats the other day. There's so much love in like Europe and Asia. I don't even understand that. But shout out to you guys. So that kind of covers up the hardware, the software of it. Let's go ahead and talk about the performance aspect of it. And what I will tell you is that it's kind of deceiving in a way. And I don't mean deceiving like they said it was one thing and it's not. What I mean by that is I want to say that the performance really isn't bad at all. I think the performance is solid, but I just don't really understand how, this phone was released in 2018, but it's not like as fast as I was expecting. Now, there is the Huawei P20 Pro, which is supposed to be like an even better upgraded version of this, but I just found that kind of strange. Again, I don't think the performance is bad, but in a 2018 flagship phone of a company, I was kind of expecting a little bit more. And see, I don't know Huawei, like I said, so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is kind of how it's supposed to be. But when I was going through the phone, I feel like the performance, the opening apps, the everything is fine. I just feel like the software might be the issue. And what I mean by that is, if I'm going and like loading up a web page or something, it seems like it's okay. It seems like it loads up just fine. Or if I'm like opening up settings, it's a very small thing, but it's fine when I'm using it or when the app's already loaded or whatever. But I think the issue is like the software is just so clunky and quirky that sometimes it's just kind of a hard time to, I guess, register what's going on. And sometimes I feel like the animations are kind of needed. Like I'll give you an example. When I swipe down on the homepage, there's like an animation for the search bar, and it just seems like it's so like it's like 10 frames per second. And like that's not a knock to the performance. Like I said, I think the performance is solid. There's 4 gigs of RAM. It has a quirkiness chipset. I don't know how to say that. An octa-core CPU, and I just think, like I said, the performance isn't bad. Now there's 2 different variants of it, so this could be it. Okay, so the 64 gig variant has 4 gigs of RAM. The 128 gig variant has 6 gigs of RAM. So that's one thing to consider. My specific unit that you're seeing in this video is the 4 gig version. So I'm assuming that the bigger version, the higher end, the 128 gig version will have, better specs and it'll be better performing overall. And that's okay. But I just feel like the software is the issue and not necessarily the specifications inside the phone. And that's over real world use. If I were to just look at the specs and just tell you from that, then I would be like, yeah, it's not that bad. But because I kind of used it, that's kind of where we get this like different viewpoint and the real world use. And that's why specs on paper are one thing, real world use is another. You guys need to tell some of these other tech YouTubers to freaking stop looking at the spec sheet all the time. Now here's another thing. I think in terms of gaming, it's really, really good. I like the gaming performance a lot. Like whatever I'm really playing with, it seems fine. Like I'm not even that big of a gamer, but I think the gaming aspect is perfectly fine. I just think to kind of sum up the whole entire performance aspect of it, I think it's a solid performing phone. I just feel like it could be better in terms of software. Now there could be more updates and it could just be my phone, but I guess we're just going to see what's going to happen in the future. Now moving on to the camera. Now this is kind of interesting because I didn't even know I looked at Huawei's roster of phones and like all of them have dual camera sensors, which is awesome. I like that a lot. It makes the phone look so much more premium. On this specific phone, there's a dual camera setup. Okay, so we have a 12 megapixel sensor, then we have a 20 megapixel sensor as well. They're both wide angle lenses. We have optical image stabilization on the main lens, and we also have laser autofocus. And like I said, those are all specs. What I'm going to tell you is it's a very solid camera. I don't think it's bad at all. I think the sensor is good. I think everything's cool. You can shoot 4K at 30 frames per second, all that stuff. It's a camera. You're going to like it. And here's the thing I don't like. Yeah. If you guys remember that song, you guys probably know what I'm talking about. When you open the camera app, okay, literally, I don't know how they did this, but they have the ugliest camera UI I've ever seen in my life. It's the ugliest camera app. It literally looks like something LG made in like 2012 with the LG G2, and even that one doesn't look as bad. It looks like the Galaxy S5's camera UI. I don't know what they're doing. Like the phone feels so premium. It feels like a very solid phone, but then with the camera app, they just make it look so ugly. Like I don't get it. What I will say though is you can change the camera app as far as I know. You can download a third-party one on the Play Store. But I just feel like for someone who's just going to be using this, it just feels like so childish. Now there's a lot of settings in here, don't get me wrong. You can do slow motion videos, panoramas, obviously 3D panorama. I don't know what that means, but you can do a lot of stuff with this camera, no doubt. But I just feel like they kind of dropped the ball with the software in terms of the camera. And I feel like that's kind of how this phone kind of dropped the ball overall. It's just the software. I just feel like if they kind of worked on the software a little bit more, they could possibly keep the home button on the front. They could keep a lot of the other things that's wrong, whatever. But I feel like most of the problems are in terms of the software. And if they fix the software, this phone will be easily much better. Hopefully with the P30 that they already dropped, hopefully it is better. I've not even seen reviews of it, but yeah, I think the camera quality isn't bad. I mean, like I said, it's a camera, you're going to like it. Obviously the newer cameras, the S10, the 10S are probably better. The S10 has way more features, but I don't think you're going to complain too much about the camera quality on this phone. Now the last thing I want to hit on is the battery life and battery size, all that stuff. Like I said, this thing does have a USB Type-C port. In terms of the battery size, it is 3,400 milliamp hours, and it is equipped with fast charging. And what I'll tell you is, this battery life is not bad at all. I think it's actually very, very good. And I think this has most to do with the 1080p panel because it's not sucking up too much power from that. But also with the specifications of the phone, it's not like an extremely heavy performing phone. So you're going to be pretty much set on the battery life. If I took my iPhone 10 usage, put it on this, I would say I can easily get a day out of it. I mean, I probably wouldn't have to charge by the end of the day. The phone doesn't heat up too much in my hands when I'm playing intensive games. I don't feel it heating up. It just seems like it's going to go through whatever I needed to go through it with, and it's not going to necessarily like die on me, which is something that I always look on a phone. My biggest fear is like I'm in the middle of a trip or I'm in the middle of like driving somewhere and the battery just dies on my phone. I'm like, oh my God. So with this phone, I don't necessarily feel like it's going to like crash on me or anything. So that's a very, very good thing. So in terms of battery life, I think you're going to be pretty much set. And to kind of wrap this thing up, I mean, I'll definitely tell you, I think the strangest thing would probably be the front mounted fingerprint sensor. I just don't know why they put it there. I feel like they could have put it on the back. They've put fingerprint sensors on the back before. I don't know what they were trying to do with this thing. It doubles as a home button, so I guess that's kind of a cool thing, but I just feel like it's kind of unnecessary. And to kind of wrap this video up, is the Huawei P20 worth it in 2019? Obviously, I'm going to say it is worth it. It's a very good phone. These phones are still kind of expensive though, even on Amazon. I don't really remember what the price was, but this phone is still kind of up there. And this phone really reminds me of the LG G7, which is kind of funny because I still think the G7 is not a bad phone at all. I think I've seen the G7s for less than like $200 or $300 on Amazon. And you can root and custom ROM that and make it way better than this phone. But I do think this phone is a very solid phone. Pretty big battery, good cameras, nice looking screen even though it's only 1080p, and overall an enjoyable experience. But I think the one thing I don't like about this phone is software, and that's the one thing I hate about LG, and then that's the one thing I hate about most other phone manufacturers too. But you can go and custom ROM this phone, I think, and root it and all that stuff. So overall, I think the Huawei P20 is still a very solid phone. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's anything like that, but I just think the software is one thing Huawei really needs to work on. Take some tips from OnePlus, dude. OnePlus's software is very good. Hopefully Huawei can implement some of that stuff too, but I'll leave a link to the Huawei P20 in the description as well, in the LG G7, and maybe even a Google Pixel 2 XL. You guys can sift through those. The prices will be down there too. I think the G7 is going to be the cheapest, and then the P20 is going to be the most expensive, but I guess we'll check that out later. But that is pretty much it. If you guys have any questions or anything, leave it down in the comment section below. Hit that like button, that'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it'll mean so much if you guys could hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, all those links are linked down below. I would really appreciate it if you guys could check it out. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.